You can see here, just one sheet, nothing else. So if we run it, first time that we run this, it's gonna pop out that we need to grant some access. And then if we go to a sheet, you can see here that I pulled the contacts and the deals. All right, guys, so short and sweet how you can connect HubSpot to a Google Sheet using the API. So in this case, for this demo, what I will pull is contacts and deals. I've noticed that that's the type of data that most people use in this CRM. So yeah, I created some dummy data here. You can see dummy contacts, and then here, if we check deals, some dummy deals, right? So the idea is that we're gonna pull this data to a Google Sheet, and it's the same thing that you can do with the rest of data here, like for example emails. So yeah, all this data, right? Companies, tickets, you can do the same thing, the same logic, and then you can move that data to a Google Sheet and do some reporting or whatever you needed the data for, right? So I have this chart here as always, and I just want to do like a quick walkthrough of what we're going to do today. So basically, first we need to get the API token. So this API is pretty straightforward. We don't need to do any authentication, and with that, it's pretty straightforward. We get an API token, and with that token, we can make calls, right? And then here, this is the code structure, right? So we're gonna have a main HubSpot, which is gonna be the orchestrator, and it's gonna call a function, this fetcher. And the idea with this fetcher is that we're gonna reuse it 2 times, right? So one to get the deals and one to get the contacts. And this is just a generic API call, right? So this one is gonna have like the proper request. So we're gonna be use this one within this function here twice, this one. And then once we get this data, we're gonna write it to a sheet, right? Pretty straightforward. So the first part is that we need to get this API token, right? So how to get this token? So if we go back to HubSpot here, you can see here there is this little G here up on top. So you click here and then you go to integrations, right? So I noticed that they kind of like they're changing this a little bit, because yeah, you can see that they call it like connect apps, privacy apps, legacy apps. Like they kind of like change a lot of stuff here, but all of them redirect to legacy apps, right? So if you go to project private apps, it's gonna redirect here. So just go directly to legacy apps, and then here you can create an app, right? So they kind of say that they're moving this to like a second version of it, but right now this is how it works to get the token. Eventually, I guess they will change it, but I mean the logic will be the same, right? Once you get the token, it will work. So you can see here that I was testing with some apps, right? But the idea is like you create an app here, and then you can see here what I've just mentioned, that they will move this in the future. Then you can choose one. I will choose private, right? Because this is just for me. And then here you can give it a name. So we'll put it like distress number 3. And then, yeah, you can upload a logo, but you don't need to do it, right? So the only thing is mandatory is the name. So you put the name there, and then you need to select the scopes, right? So this part is important, and the scopes that you need is, let me move myself a little bit here so you can see. So we need to read data, right? So it depends what you're doing. If you are just reading data, what I'm doing right now, which is just, getting the data and putting it somewhere, you need read access. But in case you need to write stuff, right, you need to create deals or something like that, you need to use write, right? But in this case, you just read. So I want to put deals, and the ones that I need, it's only this one for deals, objects, deals, read. But for contacts, we need to add more scopes. So you need to select read here, but on HubSpot, part of those details that I'm gonna pull, which is like the phone number and like email and stuff like that, is considered highly sensitive data. So you need to select those scopes as well. So that's just depending on what type of data you wanna pull, right? But in this case, this is the scopes that you need for that. And then you click update, right? And that's it, right? So once you have that, you create the app. And then you click here and continue creating the app. And that's it, right? So now you go here to authentication and you can see here the token. So this is the one that you need. So before we get this token, let's create the spreadsheet, right? Okay, so here we're in the spreadsheet and now let's get a name. HubSpot YouTube, right? And then, yeah, you can see here I get a name. So now you go to extensions, app script. Let me make this bigger so you guys can see what I'm doing here. I think like that. Yeah, like that's fine. Yeah, so let's rename this as well. And then here, as always, I'm gonna have a config, right? And in this config, we will have the API token that we want to use, right? So you can see here that this is the variable for the API token. So let's go back to API token here, show token, and then we copy the token, right? So that's what you pull here, and then here in these two variables, pretty much like once I run the automation, it's gonna create two tabs, right? So one is gonna be called HubSpot contacts, and the other one HubSpot deals. And the idea is that in each of them contains contacts or deals, right? And this is the properties that I want for each. So you can see, so the way it works with the HubSpot API is that you need to like call the endpoint. So in this case, we're gonna call two endpoints, one contacts, the other one deals. And then when calling that endpoint, we ask what type of properties we're gonna ask, like get, right? So depending on the properties, it's gonna return that. So something that might be important for you guys is like, I know that in HubSpot you can create properties for yourself. Like you can create properties, call them whatever you want and stuff like that, apart from the default ones that you have, right? So in that case, if you need to use, because like if you don't call the property with the proper name, it won't work, right? So you need to make sure that it's the same name as HubSpot call is. So yeah, so if you need these properties, you can see them here. You click in the year again, and then here you can see under data management, you can see properties, right? So you click there and you will see all the properties that you have in your HubSpot. So some of them will be the default ones that HubSpot creates for you, but the other ones are gonna be the ones that you create manually, right? So for example, this one here, preferred channels, I created that one myself. So for example, if you wanna know what is the name of it, you click here, and then you will see that this is the internal name, right? So this is important. If you don't know, you just check that internal name and then you put it here, right? So it's important that you make sure that it's using the internal name, because it doesn't always match the name that you have in HubSpot with the internal name, right? So that's important. You just need to check that in case you're on automation and it's not pulling data. Most probably that's the issue, all right? And yeah, the same idea with deal projects. So this is what is happening here, right? So now, as I mentioned, let's start with the main orchestrator here, main HubSpot, and this one we'll call the automation, right? So let's put it here so you can see what I'm referring to. So this is, let me make this bigger. I think that's easier. Yeah, so this is main HubSpot, right? So you can see the main orchestrator, and the first part that we're doing here is calling the contacts, right? So we're gonna call the endpoint contacts, and as I mentioned, we're passing what type of properties that we wanna get, right? And then we do the same with, well, actually, what I'm doing here is that I'm pulling the data from, like I'm calling each, right? So I'm getting first the contacts, and then I'm running that to a sheet, and then I'm calling deals and running that to a sheet, right? I think this was the easiest because, yeah, I don't like the code that is too spaghetti and stuff. So this is an organized way of doing it, and you can see that I'm literally reusing the functions to keep the code clean. So let's start with this one, right? So let's code this one. Fetch HubSpot, which is this one here. This one. And you can see that basically what it's doing is that it's receiving two things, right? The endpoint and then the properties that we need. So in this case, we're just initializing some some things, so the variables where that is going to aggregate all the data, and then here just the type of size of the API call that we need. So again, the way it works with an API is that it's like a book. You can think of it like a book, right? So you make out the first call, it's going to show you the first page, and if you need more data, you keep looping until you finish with all the data, right? So you can see here that per page I'm getting 100 items. So this is important because that's what I noticed. Like pagination is important with HubSpot, with this API. So you're gonna make sure that it's working, so you can pull all the data, right? But you can see here that I'm doing that, right? So if you run this, it will work. And then once we get the data doing all the looping, we get the results here, right? So this, I'm calling this one twice, right? So one for contacts and one for deals, and the only thing that is changing is the endpoints and properties, right? And then we need another one. You can see here that within this function, I'm calling this function here. And this is pretty much just a request. I just put it outside. But let me show you the function. And this is the function, right? So you can see here that this is just a generic request function, and pretty much is calling to this endpoint. This is the API endpoint, the base endpoint, and here we are just creating like the query, how we want the query to be. And then you can see here that we are passing the private API, the app token, and that's it, right? So pretty much we make the call. Once we get the data, we parse it in a JSON and we return that. And this is just a guard in case something happens, doesn't break, right? It's just a generic request, nothing fancy there. And then once we have that data, right? Because at that point we already have the data here, we need to write it to a sheet. So this is the function that is doing that. And you can see that pretty much what it's doing is receiving the object, which is the raw data that we have, then the sheet name, which is like these sheet names that I need, that I want to create, and then the property delete. And this is just for like the headers, right? So yeah, like for example, this first part, what we're doing is like creating the sheet. If the sheet doesn't exist, if the sheet does exist, it's gonna clean it. Pretty much that's what it's doing here. And then here we are adding the headers, right? Cleaning the sheet and just adding the headers. And then here we are just doing the mapping, right? So you're kind of like getting the data from the objects and then just putting the data in rows so we can write that, right? So you can see here that I'm writing in bulk. Writing in bulk is always advised because it's faster. You don't want to be like, let's say you are pulling like, I don't know, 1,000 contacts, for example. Imagine you are pulling like one by one. It's going to take ages, right? So it's better if you always do this. Like you map everything and then you just put it in only one call to a spreadsheet. So always try to use bulks here. And that's it, right? So that's pretty much the automation. So if we save this, you can see here that I don't have anything. You can see here just one sheet, nothing else. So if we run it, first time that we run this, it's gonna pop up that we need to grant some access. So you click yes, you just follow the flow, select all, and then continue, right? And then if we go to a sheet, you can see here that I pulled the contacts and the deals. So if we were to check this and compare, let me go back and see what's up here. So let's go to contacts and then let's compare. All right, so you can see here that I have, 10 contacts that I created for dummy data, which are here. Some first name, last name, the emails, phone number, right? Then we have the status of the lead, some preferred channels, and the created date, just in case you need it, right? And then that's the same logic with deals. So let me move myself a little bit here. So Hubs deals. And then if we go to deals here, you can see the same thing, right? So we pull in 10 deals that I created, some deals names, deal stage, and the amounts, right? And that's it, right? Another thing that is important, if you're pulling the owner, most probably won't come like the name itself, it will come with an ID. So if you need that, you need to make sure that it's mapping that. So, you call the IDs and then you call the names with IDs and then you map that, right? And then you write that to a sheet, just in case you need this, but if you don't need it, that will be fine, right? Also, if you don't care, you can just have the IDs, right? And that's fine. Just if you care about that. And that's it, guys. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to drop them down below in the comments. I will reply to them as soon as I see them. And as always, the code is free. You can just go to the description. There will be a link. Just go there, click there, and then you can download the code for free. All right.